G'day, Season 7 of Drive to Survive airs on Friday, March 7th. And here's what you can expect to be featured this year. This season looks like being one of the best, with so much drama on track and off. And one of the biggest off-track dramas last year was in Bahrain at the start of the season with Christian Horner. Drive to Survive will cover this in some detail. The production people were on the list of recipients of that bulk email that contained the alleged messages sent from Christian to his PA. It was on everyone's lips. We'd all seen those messages, and the Netflix crew were busy working overtime documenting Red Bull's every move in the PR nightmare. Maybe we'll learn a little bit more given their access. Remember, they can't air anything they shot last year until the season comes out, and they could be sitting on some dynamite footage, or it could all be just a rehash of what we know. So how did Drive to Survive actually come about? Well, I can tell you that Amazon were actually in discussion with a team about a doco going back a number of years ago, but to get it done, F1 had to say yes, as they have to agree to provide all the on-track footage. This was just after Liberty had purchased F1, and they said that they wanted all teams involved. Amazon came back and said, look, we can feature a team per year, but that would have taken a decade. That's when this man, Sean Bratches, contacted a colleague of his at Netflix and ran the idea past that person, and they loved the idea. Negotiations went on for some time, and eventually F1 agreed to it, subject to getting all the teams on board. Well, of course, they didn't get all the teams. Ferrari and Mercedes said no to Season 1. But after they saw the results, they were quickly putting their hand up for Season 2. And Drive to Survive has since been one of the best things that's ever happened to the sport. And what about Daniel Ricciardo leaving the sport in Singapore? Will that be covered? Yes. In fact, I was standing with the Drive to Survive crew out the front of the AlphaTauri hospitality suite late into the night. They were there, as I was, to watch Lando Norris go into the garage to see Daniel. They spent some 10 minutes, I'm guessing, in there. I could see a Drive to Survive boom mic floating around, so I figure they have something. Whether or not the camera was in the same room, I'll be keen to see. Then Lando left. Drive to Survive eventually got tired and went home, but I hung around until just prior to 2 a.m. to see Daniel leave, and there were no TV cameras around for that moment. But it won't get as much airtime as I suspected, because that episode saw 5 drivers film content for this episode on their mobile phones. I'll tell you the 5 drivers in just a moment. Now, if you have Reddit, you'll be happy to hear that I have my own subreddit. This will be a mostly fan-driven space, but occasionally I or a member of the team will pop by, and if you have any news, F1 insights, memes, or discussion topics, make sure to pop them in there. That material may even come up in one of my YouTube videos. Just click the link in the description or head to r/Kim Elman F1. And those 5 drivers, Lando Norris, Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, Charles Leclerc and George Russell. A 5-some that grew up racing together as youngsters, get on well with each other, and I would be looking out for that episode. You'll recognise it because it looks stylistically different and feels different to the other episodes as a result. And think classroom. Now, if you're wondering what say the teams have in the final production, I can tell you that they have a narrow scope of opportunity to influence the content. They do get to see any material that they've given permission to film, and they're also shown content where others are talking about them. Not finished episodes, just the raw vision. They can ask for an explanation or context on how that material would be used, and if they're not happy, they can submit requests. Wherever possible, they're accommodated, and I guess the producers don't want to get those teams offside because they need that series to keep rolling. So there is some toing and froing involved. Franco Colapinto bursting onto our radar with 9 races to go. I'd be surprised if that doesn't get some airtime. That will be eagerly viewed by the Latin Americans in particular, and that is a huge audience. Drive to Survive crew were with Franco in Monza when he went and saw his F2 crew on the Thursday. They were on the wall at Austin when Franco greeted the thousands of fans on the track after the race, and they get to walk through the garage with him. I can't. They have intimate audio via boom mics. They get up close and personal, and when drivers are on a high, they don't worry about the boom mics in their face. If they're not happy, or perhaps they're having a confidential conversation, it's not surprising to see them swipe those microphones away. And in those instances, the audio and the cameraman just simply back off. And still on the subject of Franco, he got that seat after Logan Sargent was sacked, and that came about after a crash in Zandvoort. I suggest we'll see a bit on that as well. A little bit about the company that produces this show. It's Box to Box Films. They'd done a Senna documentary a while back, and when their name came up on the short list of production companies offered to Formula One by Netflix, the guys at F1 had seen that doco, they liked it, and that pretty much got them the gig. That company has a number of directors, producers working on those episodes, and each episode has its own producer. They meet regularly throughout the season to discuss the progress of their episodes, and that's to ensure that things aren't overlapping and to make sure that they're on track. Some of you non-fans of the series will probably say the series has passed its prime, but let's have a look at the numbers in 2024. Viewers, yes, were down about 5%, but when you compare that to some of the other box-to-box series, the golf and the Tour de France, for instance, they're down 20 to 50%. And the tennis series, well, that ended up being axed. So Drive to Survive is very much the star performer in that genre. And to that end, it won a Sports Emmy in 2022 and was nominated for 2 more last year. F1 agreed to Drive to Survive because they thought that it would bring more fans to the fold. And a poll of 1,900 self-identified adult US F1 fans in 2022 showed that 53% credited the series as a reason they become viewers of F1 races. It was a sweet deal for F1. Netflix pays them a fee to shoot the show, and F1 gets more fans. In fact, F1 is the only sport in the world where the average age of the viewer is dropping and the number of females in the sport is on the rise. And those stats are music to the ear of advertisers. On the production side, their cameras shoot thousands of hours of footage, although far less than what they shot in the first year when they weren't sure of just how much content would be required. And while they have a plan for each episode, they need to be able to pivot quickly. For instance, when Christian Horner saga raised its head in Bahrain. In 2019, some 45 million Americans were fans of the sport. That grew 10% in 2022 to just shy of 50 million, and this at a time when many sports were losing followers. If you're hoping that Drive to Survive will look at the behind the scenes of the F1 movie, you'll be disappointed. It was off limits. I think they'll spend a little bit of time on Carlos Sainz's departure from Ferrari. It was a big story last year, obviously, and I was at the back of the FIA garage in Abu Dhabi, expecting them to be waiting for him to exit. But they'd left. They were there a little earlier when Pierre Gasly came out and gave his girlfriend Kika a kiss. And if this makes the cut, I'll be partly obscured by this microphone. Box to Box has 2 or 3 crews in the paddock every race. And for bigger races, they might jump to 4 with a cameraman, audio operator and producer in each crew. Some of the crews are embedded, which means they wear Ferrari kit and they spend that weekend with Ferrari. Next weekend, they could be with McLaren or Mercedes. And not only do they shoot at the track, they get access to drivers away from it, sometimes in their homes. But there's no guarantee that even if they spend a day with a certain driver, that will end up in an episode. I've spoken to 1 or 2 managers who've told me, yes, they've invested a significant chunk of time with the crew away from the track, and then that material never ended up making it to air. Brazil last year saw that remarkable podium featuring both Alpine drivers. That will get a run, and so will Alpine's struggles in trying to portray an image of both drivers liking each other. I'll be very keen to see how they handle that. Drive to Survive's brief is to introduce the sport to potential new fans and fire up existing fans. Has it worked? Well, if you look at the paddock these days, it's far busier than what it was in 2017. And very much the drivers find it tougher to move around. They've gone from athletes to celebrities. So what do the TV broadcasters think of the series? After all, Drive to Survive gets this amazing access and pay nothing like what Sky or Canal Plus pays. Initially, many of those broadcasters were unhappy. Obviously, they didn't want to get scooped and they saw Drive to Survive as a competitor, but they are completely different animals. DTS has to wait up to a year to show their hand, while TV shows action live from the track. Certainly the broadcaster's stance has softened. They see it now as bringing in new fans, and that is good for their business. The teams also are generally supportive of it, as it exposes their team and their sponsors to a larger market. They can charge more for that sponsorship because more people are seeing it through this different avenue. Under Bernie Ecclestone's reign, we rarely saw the likes of the engineers' room, the drivers' homes, their boats and cars, and Bernie would never have served up this type of legendary content.
Gene, we finished 4th and 5th here. We look like rock stars, huh? And now we are a bunch of wankers.
This is why the show has done so well. Access is king, and of course, it's beautifully shot and edited. F1's been trying to crack the US market for decades, and this series has gone partway there for them. Yes, they've copped criticism for piecing bits and pieces from different episodes to perhaps tell a story that's not 100% true on screen. But really, does that matter? And yes, they add sound effects to the on-track vision because it's just more appealing. Today, F1 drivers are now TV stars thanks to Drive to Survive, and come July, many will be movie stars with the release of the F1 movie. Liberty Media has expanded the sports audience, and now that audience wants more and more. If you're in the paddock, keep a lookout for the DTS crews. They're normally the only ones with an audio engineer holding a boom mic, which is pretty handy for us photographers because if I see a boom mic coming towards me, I'm pretty sure there's going to be something interesting happening just below it. Oh, and they use completely different camera rigs to what TV does. Look at this monster here. And that's just one of many different rigs that they lug about. Now, given you are this far into the video, I'm going to suggest that you'll be binge watching this series when it drops. If you happen to see me pop up in an episode, I'd be most grateful if you sent me a DM via Instagram and told me. Now, if you've forgotten to subscribe to my channel, here's the perfect opportunity. And at the very least, please hit the like button. And for a whole lot of extra content and merchandise, have a look over here. Thanks for watching and stay passionate.